Welcome. My name is Anna Cairns, and I'm your host for today's presentation of Introducing the Chicago Manual of Style for PerfectIt. The webinar will run approximately 1 hour, give or take a couple of minutes. Our presenter is Daniel Human. He is the CEO of Intelligent Editing and the original developer of PerfectIt. In addition to Editors Canada, Daniel has spoken at organizations around the world, including ACES, the Chartered Institute of Editing and Proofreading, the Society of English Native Speaking Editors, the Indian Copy Editors Forum, and his software is used by thousands of editors around the world, as well as 6 of the top 10 global pharmaceutical firms. Joining Daniel is Jennifer Ringblom and Chris McKay, who will be answering questions that come up as we go along. Jennifer Ringblom is joining us from the University of Chicago Press, where she manages the Chicago Manual of Style online. And Chris works in customer success with PerfectIt. We are also so pleased to have Russell Harper available during the presentation to answer questions. Russell contributed to the 8th and 9th editions of Kate L. Turabian's A Manual for Writers of Research Papers, Theses, and Dissertations. He was the principal reviser of both the 16th and 17th editions of the Chicago Manual of Style, and he is the editor of its online Q&A and Shop Talk blog. Welcome, Daniel, Jennifer, Russell, and Chris.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I can skip through these slides that just introduce us, but I will say, just to reiterate what you just said, which is that it is fantastic to have Russell on the call. We weren't allowed to sort of advertise that one in advance, but hopefully a nice surprise for everyone who's joining us today. Please do include your questions in the Q&A and we will get to those, and Russell will be joining at various points. So this is sort of broad outline of what I wanted to cover. I wanted to do, the principle behind this presentation is, if we take you through some of the more technical aspects of what we did to create the style, my hope is that that will help you in applying it. You understand what the program is doing, what the program is not doing, and some of the advanced sort of tips and tricks that you can do around that to get more out of it. So let's start really basic. I'm going to kind of assume that most people have had some interaction with PerfectIt, or seen PerfectIt a little bit before, but I'm sure some haven't. So just, to make sure everyone's on the same page, what is PerfectIt? PerfectIt is an add-in for Microsoft Word. It launched in 2009, which in tech terms means we are absolutely ancient. And it has sort of 2 levels of functionality. Out of the box, it works as kind of a consistency checker, but you can also build styles into it, and that's very much what we've done and what we're going to be talking about with respect to the Chicago Manual. And what I want to do is just stop at the outset here and think about this idea of what I'm saying, because hopefully it's kind of alarming. The idea that you're going to have your software and it's going to check for a Chicago style, that should be setting off some level of, I don't think so. That's not going to work out well. And if that's what's going on in the back of your mind, then, fundamentally, you're right. Like, you can't have computers magically enforce Chicago style for you. And a lot of what we talk about is going to be, why that is and what limits there naturally are on computer checking. I did a little bit of research before this talk, and I found out that the first spell check was invented in 1961. And as everyone in this audience will all attest, 50 years later, they are still making, 50 years? 60 years later, they are still making a lot of mistakes. So there are a lot of limits. No software should be magically enforcing Chicago style. The question becomes, if we accept that those limits exist, if we accept that computers aren't good at this kind of thing, well then what can we do? So the first thing is, let's accept not going to have any kind of comprehensive approach. It's not going to be able to cover everything in the Chicago manual. It's a very thick book on a lot of topics. We can have a kind of minimum, a kind of idea that, well, if we're going to have a piece of software that can check parts of Chicago style, it's got to do the searching the text for you. You know, the advantage of software is that it can interact with your document and show you where things are in the document, as opposed to you looking up at a book or looking up online. That's the edge that software can have, and why this is so relevant. If it can't find everything, it still needs to find enough. Like, it can't find nothing either. Like, it has to find some of these things. And the principle that we really went with was that if it can find enough, can we use the examples that it finds to teach you the rest, or to teach you more? That you know, okay, it can't find everything, but it can teach you a lot more than it can necessarily show you. And if it does that, the result is that, you know, if it does all of this, the result should be that you save a lot of time in your edit. Instead of looking things up, software is helping you. I've seen a lot of different solutions to this over the years. The one I do like best is the editor that wanted to get the hyphenation table from the Chicago manual tattooed on their arm. I don't know if this is as good as that. I mean, that is a very hard level to compete with. But if we accept that as the gold standard, maybe we can come in for a second and maybe, you know, less painful, less permanent approach. I'd like to think that's kind of an innovative way of thinking about Chicago manual and thinking about checking. And, you know, us software people, like, we think we're innovating, and we get very quickly carried away. And you always start, you know, comparing to the great entrepreneurs and the great innovators. And when we do this comparison, it's an interesting one, because they, you know, there are always these great quotes of, I don't even know if these quotes are 100% right, but, you know, apocryphal though they may be, that if we asked customers what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. That's the Henry Ford one. And we're nothing like that at all, actually. That's a million miles from where our approach to this. This is not us thinking light years into the future and coming up with something completely different. Hundreds of editors wrote to us and said that what we really want is a Chicago manual enforcement in PerfectIt. So it's very much a change, not that's, you know, out there and deep tech, a futuristic thing, but more coming from, you know, probably some of the people on this call are probably the ones that have helped us make this happen and really push for it. So we tried to make this very much in line with our core philosophy, which is that, you know, we believe that people make the best editing decisions and that they always will. Our tech is about helping, you know, you to edit faster and better. It's not replacing editors. It's not disrupting the space or any of that sort of fashionable stuff. It's just trying to work with the way you work. If we think about that, sort of do a gut check of what we said what PerfectIt is. The question is, what is the Chicago manual for PerfectIt? So it is a style in PerfectIt. We'll come on to see exactly what I mean by that. You can think about it as a supplement to CMOS Online, with the big difference that what it's doing is that it's searching the text for you, and when it finds things in the text, it's giving you hints, it's giving you advice, it's giving you the actual words from the manual, so that it teaches the principles of the manual. And for those who are familiar with PerfectIt, I just want to sort of draw your attention immediately to how this is different. Like, okay, it still looks like a program in Word. It's still, there is a lot that's the same here. But if you know the program, you can see that there is a difference. That rather, you know, typically PerfectIt will show you two things. It won't know which one is right, but it'll show you these inconsistencies. And here, because we've got a style behind it, it's not showing two things. It's showing one. It's giving a preferred style. And it's giving explanation around why that is the preferred style. And more than that, something we've never had before, there's this kind of new see more. And if you click where it says see more from CMOS, it takes you to the words that are kind of built into PerfectIt. And you can click the links out of that to go and see even more on the CMOS Online site. All right, so far straightforward. This is the slide that kind of scares me a little bit, because the first thing people want to know is, well, what parts of the manual have you included? Where have you done this? And that's where it gets confusing, because people hear Chicago style and they think citations, and that's not what we're doing. We've mostly, we hope to do that in time, but the place we focused our initial attention is on how style and usage, that kind of, those kind of issues. But even if we limit to that, and even if we limit to the type of checks that PerfectIt runs, there's still this idea of, well, you say you included this, well, but it doesn't find X, Y, Z. And that's what I want you to make you aware of, that yes, okay, it's looking for things within these categories, but it doesn't mean it's comprehensive within these categories. It's still, you know, it's finding examples. It's not trying to be comprehensive. It's not finding everything. And to give you a bit more around that, what I thought I'd do is take you through kind of a bunch of examples, kind of explain the design principles behind the choices. And as an overview of that, what I'd say is that, you know, immediately there's a lot in the Chicago manual. There's no point in us replicating something that's already part of Microsoft Spelling and Grammar Check, which is now called Microsoft Editor. Like, we don't need to duplicate that. We knew we wanted to make use of Merriam-Webster. The fact that there are, you know, terms and preferences within that, we knew that would be very relevant because it's the dictionary that Chicago is tied to. We knew as a guiding principle that we didn't want it to do too much. That when software finds too many things that are wrong, that's when language professionals just turn off and don't want anything to do with it. We knew it had to look around at some of the context. We knew, as I've said a few times, it can't be comprehensive, but it also can't find nothing. And it had to have this notion of teachable examples. So Russell, perhaps you can fill in here, at least I can have a sip of my tea before it gets cold. What would you say about how we incorporated Merriam-Webster? What was the thinking in how you wanted that to be included in the Chicago Manual of Style for PerfectIt?
Well, as you said, Chicago depends on Merriam-Webster, which really means that it's, you know, our style is to choose the first listed term there. And you said that, you know, we don't want to replicate words spelling check. Well, PerfectIt without Chicago style checks consistency. So let's say it finds, let's say a word allows two versions of two spellings of a word, like let's say ginkgo and ginkgo, the ginkgo leaf, like the tree, Ginkgo, that's correct. Gingko is common, and because it's in a dictionary, I guess Word accepts both, so, you know, fine. PerfectIt will fly through, and if you've only used one, like the Gingko, the incorrect one, nothing will happen. But PerfectIt will come in if you've used both and say, hey, you've used both, pick one. So Chicago takes that one step further in PerfectIt, and it says no. If it finds Gingko, it will say Ginkgo is correct. So you need to fix that. So it narrows down your options to Chicago's preference. And in this case, Chicago's preference is also, it's what everybody's preference should be, regardless of UK, Canadian, or American spelling preferences and anything else. The fact that both are commonly used, you know, doesn't matter to, you know, to editors. We need the correct one. So.
Thank you. And while we're on it, are there any questions so far that you want to address, Russell?
Nope, not yet. I don't see any. You're doing well.
or just confused everyone into stunned silence. It could really be either way. Please do send questions in. It's wonderful we have Russell's expertise on here, so you can make those questions challenging, whatever it is. It'll be great to make use of that. So I said I wanted to go through those design principles. We talked about dictionary there. I want to talk about this idea that it shouldn't find too many things. So an important preference in the Chicago Manual, as an example, is the term university, which is lowercase, and it's university and other common nouns when it's used apart from an initial name, even when it's used to refer to that name. And we could build that into PerfectIt. Like, that's a relatively simple PerfectIt thing. We could have said, okay, well, always just look for the word university and have it be lowercase. The trouble with that is you'd end up with a ton of false positives, because there are still, even with that preference, you know, when it's next to a name, there are lots of cases where university will be with initial capitals. So in these sorts of instances, we haven't built Chicago's preference in at all. What we've done instead is rely on PerfectIt's checking, which is that it will look for consistency and will show you the consistency issue. So we don't want to stop editors at every legitimate use. Want to make the edit go faster. So in this case, the way in which we've enforced the manual is by not adding anything. And I'm just going to talk through a few of these examples, and they all go different ways. So how about the example daughter-in-law, which seems really straightforward. Daughter-in-law hyphenated. Why can't we build that into PerfectIt? Well, we probably can, but what about the phrase a daughter in law school or a daughter in law enforcement? There are these funny exceptions that come up in English. You know, 21st as a ordinal would be hyphenated, but what about 21st floor apartments or 21st graders? And so we have built some of these preferences in, and we've built them in with specific exceptions, but that doesn't mean we thought of all the exceptions, because you can see these get pretty tricky and pretty obscure. So where these do come up, you need to be on the lookout for, okay, that's helping, but always checking that context, because there are going to be false positives, because we can't possibly think of every use like this. And again, you know, more examples, you see the different ways in which we cope with this. With italics, Chicago has preference of italics for the names of books and periodicals and plant and animal species if they're in their scientific name, or court cases, and we can't include the infinite list of all the books and all the periodicals and all the court cases. It's not infinite list, I suppose, but my God, it's a long, finite list. We can include some examples. Those might come up and they show the principles of CMOS, but they also might not come up on your text. So there's these kind of, okay, these really long areas where we just can't, it's too big. The sample set is so wide that we can't realistically include it. And those just have to be things that you're aware of as you use the product. But we're not consistent about the fact that these sample sets are wide, because here's a sample set that we were able to include. Possessive names. The thing about names is that, yeah, it's a very, very big, long list, and it seems almost infinite, but the top 10% of names, the 1,000 most common, probably make up, I don't know, 50, 60, 70% of the usages. And if that's the case, well, then we can build them in. And, you know, if we build 2,000 names in, that is a lot, and it doesn't slow the computer down at all. We're not close to that kind of infinite list of books and things. It's not going to slow the computer down. It's not going to lead to a lot of false positives either. So we have included, you know, the 1,000 most common names ending in S, and we can use that to check for possessives. And then there's all these others, you know, examples of where we've tried to include things and include them in certain contexts. So the word Arctic, when it's used for the geographic region, is capitalized, but an Arctic stare isn't capitalized. An Arctic chill wouldn't usually be capitalized. I suppose it could technically be an Arctic chill in the Arctic, but you probably wouldn't refer to it that way. It's not really how that word is used. So when it's used in its non-literal meaning, it's lowercase. So we wouldn't build every use of the word Arctic into PerfectIt, but we can certainly use the ones where, you know, an Arctic chill, stare, all these ones, and those are built in as lowercase. And hopefully with that, we cover enough of those examples that we're teaching the principle of the manual as we go. So I'm going to get on and do a demo, but hopefully at this point there are at least a few questions, because I can't have explained that perfectly. I'm pretty confident about that.
We do have some questions that you're definitely going to get to later, which would be Canadian spelling and CMOS and how that interacts. But nothing about like functionally speaking how to use PerfectIt. There's also a question about BCE and CE, which of course CMOS checks for AD and BC.
And I can get into those in detail after the demonstration when some of the related details will come up. And I flag those to talk about those because they're very good questions.
Awesome. Okay, so Russell, you just if you come in and interrupt me, because otherwise I will just take this demo and go way too long showing all the examples. So if you see any points where you want to chime in, please do. Okay, so really easy to use Chicago Manual of Style for PerfectIt. We've opened up Word, we've got a document open. I click PerfectIt 5, I click Launch PerfectIt, and here's the difference for those that know PerfectIt. You're going to go, instead of just being drawn to that big blue start button as usual, this time I'm going to click the list of styles. I forgot to clear out the list, but we've got Chicago Manual of Style. I'm going to choose that. And that's it. I'm now ready to press start. I've selected Chicago Manual of Style from my list of styles, and I'm going to click start. And immediately what you can see is that if you're used to seeing PerfectIt, this is different. We don't have the two choices. We've got a clear preference. It says the phrase, it says hyphenation of phrases. The phrase non sequitur is usually open. It gives me the option to see more about that. It shows me the preferred one, and it shows me the location where we've not used the preferred one. So I could just look at this. Let's see more, and let's see what Chicago Manual has to say about this. Click that. It says non-English phrases. Phrase from a language other than English usually remains open or hyphenated as in the original language, regardless of its position in a sentence. So we've got the words, we've got the explanation, we've got the advice. Let's just click fix. And now we've brought that in line with what the manual would suggest. After I've clicked fix, I go on, look at the next one. And this is hyphenation of compounds. It says the term socioeconomic is usually closed, gives us again the option to see more, shows us the preference, shows us the place where it's not in that preference. So click see more if we want to get the advice from the manual. Let's see what it says about this. It says combining forms. Compounds that include a combining form such as electro or socio sometimes form one word, e.g. electrocardiogram, socioeconomic, and are sometimes hyphenated, other examples. So that's exactly one of the examples for one word. So I'm going to click fix. We understand why and move on to the next one. And now this is different. Suddenly we don't have a clear preference from Chicago. What we have is kind of the fallback here, which is PerfectIt's default consistency checking. And it says a hyphenation of words. A word appears with and without a hyphen. We got some advice from Chicago, but it's not going to be specific because this is just, it's not going to be specific to that word. It's specific to hyphenation. And then we've got the choice, sociocultural with a hyphen or sociocultural closed. Well, the wonderful thing about this one is that we just learned this principle. We just looked at socioeconomic, and it's the same rule here. So we know that that's going to be closed. And we can just click fix. We can go to all these instances with the hyphen and click fix. Always check the context for all the reasons we were describing before. Click fix, and then move on to the next one. So we've got another check. It says words following so-called. It says quotation marks are usually unnecessary for a word or phrase that follows so-called. And we can get the advice on this from CMOS 7.59, and it will give us a detailed description. I won't read that at this point, but you sort of get the idea that we're seeing the text in context. Don't have to go separately and look it up. And we can click fix and not have the quotes around it. So I'll just see if that works. And it does. And then move on to the next one. Another one, centuries and decades. So it says plural forms of decades and other numerals are spelled with an S alone, so no apostrophe. We can go again, we can see more from CMOS, and it will give us the explanation. Hopefully sort of you're getting the idea of what we do. I won't read through the words, but you can see, the guidance from the manual there. We could click these links. I could click 9.33 to go to 9.33 where it says C7.15. I could click that and it'll open up a browser and it'll go to the full guidance at those points. And on this one, I'm just going to click fix again. And that brings it in line. Any questions on that so far?
I haven't seen any questions come in about those things specifically. And I'm glad you reminded us that it will take you outside of Word and PerfectIt while you're running it. You can do anything. You can toggle out and check Merriam-Webster. You can link to the manual, and it will just keep running in the background. So it's no problem leaving Word for a while if you need to do more research.
So let's see. So we've got another one. It says numbers with percent, except at the beginning of a sentence, use a numeral to express a percentage. So we've got written out 44 before the word percent, and the preferred style will be 44 in digits. Pretty straightforward. Click fix and move on to the next one. It says except at the beginning of a sentence, use a numeral, so it's the same thing, express percentage. And so easy at this point just to go, oh yeah, I just read this, I know what I'm doing, and click fix. But if we were to do this, we wouldn't be paying attention to what it's telling us. I'm reading this like it's no advice at all, but these things matter. It says except at the beginning of a sentence, use a numeral to express a percentage. Well, look, that's at the beginning of a sentence. So in this situation, we don't click fix. Just going to leave it. And I'm just going to click next because that is already the way it's supposed to be. That is a false positive. Oh boy, I don't know if my screen is going to go bright to brown. It seems to do it at this time of day. I hope it's okay. If it gets really annoying, let me know, Chris. It's because something got bright here. I assure you it's annoying here. All that matters is it's not annoying to you. It's found possessives, and that's the brown to bright thing. It says possessives. If the use is possessive, add an S, e.g. Jane Myers' place, but not if it's plural, the Myers' place for a name Meyer. Okay, so let's take a look closely at this one. We've got the name Myers and an apostrophe, and the preferred style would be to put an S on the end. But I don't know. I mean, I should know this document because this was, in order to provide a good test, we're using my old master's thesis. So I should know this, but that was a long time ago. There's gray here for a reason. And I don't remember the detail around it. So, but I can see that Myers, the name is not Meyer, the name is Myers, and I can see it from this reference. So that definitely should have an apostrophe S on the end for the possessive as we're being advised and as we could see the detail from Chicago on. So I'm going to click fix on that one and go on to the next. The abbreviation et al. And others spelled with a period after al, but not after et. Very easy mistake to make. Click fix and move on to the next one. Quite like this one. This is going to be, no one's asking questions, so I'm going to start asking questions of you without giving the answer away, because that wouldn't be fun. Someone's going to get it immediately. There are actually two things wrong in this location. See if you can spot both of them. I'll do the first one now, and PerfectIt might find something else later on. So the check is preferred spelling, and it says the abbreviation for ibedum in the same place usually ends in a period, and so we could get more from the CMOS, but I think that's fine, and click fix. So we just added that period and then move on to the next one. Here we go. Start point says, unless the context is technical or scientific, and we've seen before that these unless and except are things we need to listen to. Unless the context is technical or scientific, express percentages using the word percent, e.g. 3% spelled out, not 3% with a symbol. So let's take a look at this. Well, unless the context is technical or scientific, this is a table. It distinctly looks technical and maybe scientific as well, but definitely technical. So all of these ones are fine. Lots of false positives here. We don't need to worry about this. This is in a table too. I just keep on going down. I want to check these things because you never know what's going to come up. All seem to be in tables, except now. In response to whether they consider themselves tourists, only 24% of respondees. You could argue that's technical, but I would say that's in the main text now, and I would switch that. So we've made 2 changes. We skipped all of the other ones there. And then I'm going to click next. Oh boy, this is the stuff that destroys my brain. I'm half British, half American, and do not know whether periods or commas belong on which side of what quote. I will recommend Russell's article on the subject, but I, I've read it twice and still can't keep this one in my brain, which is why PerfectIt is useful. So other people have less trouble with it than I do, if I'm honest. But check carefully. Periods and commas precede closing quotation marks, but other punctuation marks depend on the context. So what have we got? We've got comma and quote, comma and quote. Oh, yeah, I even say it the wrong way around. You see that? It is quote and then comma. And we would switch them. Okay, so I'm looking down this list. Commas and periods, both are on the wrong side. And I'm going to do something I rarely do. I hope it's right here. I'm going to use the fix all button. Just checking these to see, but they all do seem to be the same. So mostly I try to avoid the fix all button. I think that, I want people to look at the context. And always if I'm teaching something, I go intentionally slowly, but here I'm going to click fix all. And it will run down that list and make all of those changes for us. And I can go back and I can check that it's done the right thing. I can check that everything is, I can always undo these ones. That's the undo button there. But I think that one's safe. I'm going to click next. So it's found common typos. As I say, we don't want to replicate functionality from Microsoft Editor, but Microsoft Editor doesn't catch a bunch of things. As I say, what is it, 60 years of spell check? Well, they still have some issues, and this is one of them. So it says, these words are frequently misspelled, so please double check them. Per se, spelled S-A-Y, should be per se S-E, and whoever the author of this has got it wrong, click fix and click fix again. And then move on to the next one. The term and or can often be replaced by either and or with no loss in meaning. So this is from section 5.250, and as with the others, we can go and get the guidance direct from Chicago. But what you can't do here is click fix. It doesn't have a single suggestion. We have to look at the context. We can jump into Word and we can say whether it takes the form of a gift brought by or don't really need and in that one. And we can jump back, and PerfectIt recognizes that there is a change, and we can keep going that way. But there doesn't have to be a fix in all these things. Sometimes it's just alerting you, and you jump in and make the change. Excuse me. Chicago doesn't have a ton of rules on, it has guidance on gender-free language, but it doesn't have a ton that is specified specifically, but this one is. Unless chairperson is part of a formal title, consider using the well-established form chair instead. Well, often it is a formal title, but in this case, I think we can reasonably change that title. Would probably depend on the institution how much that's fixed, but I'll make that change. Any questions while it's thinking?
We do have one question that we get quite often. I think it's worth mentioning about PerfectIt and tracking changes in Word.
I'll come back to that one. We do get that one quite often, and it is a big issue, I know, but I know that I want to focus a little bit more on the specific Chicago manual ones. Maybe if you can answer that one in the chat, we could probably cover it that way. And there might be some links on our site or something where we've probably written about that one as well. This is the check of italics. It says abbreviations for the Latin ibidem in the same place. Oh, I did say that there were two things that were going to come up. I hope people got this. The other mistake that we said we had the period missing before, the other mistake is that it's no italics as the preference. I'm going to click fix on that. And that's how PerfectIt will do things. It goes through in its sequence of checks and where it finds two things, it comes back to that item. I think I might have set this to skip one of the most important things I actually wanted to cover in this, which is a shame. I'm going to go back and I'm going to make sure we cover it, which is different spelling variations. So for a previous demo, I turned it off, but I really actually want to have it on. So we skipped this earlier, unless the document itself has changed. Yeah, we skipped this earlier. It would have come in the sequence just after the preferred spellings, but it's a really useful one because we had those questions about different the question about different language and what you do with Canadian English. So let's do some examples of this. We have a variety of these built into the spelling variations check. I'll probably call on Russell to help me in a sec, but I'll give you the basics of it. So it says here, in American English, among is usually preferred to amongst, and we can go to section 5.250 and we can see what's said about that one. And whereas PerfectIt would normally, point to among and amongst, what it does with the Chicago Manual of Style is there's a very clear preference from 5.250. It finds these amongst, and it will suggest making them among. And I'll bet that kind of thing applies just as much in Canadian English. If you're going to be writing in Chicago style, there's no reason to be writing amongst. Check carefully. Chicago usually prefers the first listed term in Merriam-Webster. So it's found, we are, as tied to Merriam-Webster, we found curricula, it found curriculums, and curricula would be the first preference in Merriam-Webster. But this is probably a good point to get Russell's input, because dictionary use and what you should be tying to is complicated in Canada. So do you have anything you want to add about that, Russell, in this sort of situation?
Well, I was planning on falling back on you, Daniel, because you're the one who goes, coast across the Atlantic and back all the time, and then Canada adds another complication because its spelling is sort of in a limbo that is closer to UK than US spelling, but there are many hundreds of words that will be flagged specifically by the spelling variations and preferred spelling checks in Chicago style. I would say that if it were my preference, even if I were doing a document that had, let's say, Canadian or UK spelling, I would keep it on because, as you can see from this one, for example, curriculums, the preferred term is curricula, the plural, but that's not true just of US style. That's true of Canadian and British style. If you look it up in the OED, it'll say curricula. I'm not even sure it has curriculums for that one. So that's valuable. But the thing I would rely on you for was that nifty trick for running PerfectIt without the spelling variations turned on, and then running it again with Canadian spelling check, which is
let's do exactly that. So what you can see when we have the spelling variations turned on, it's finding these things that we used to recommend that you turn it off if you're outside the US. And what we've realized from examples like this is actually that's a really strong, you're losing a lot if you turn it completely off. And actually what I think we'll probably switch to recommending is you keep it on, but afterwards come back. So I'm going to demonstrate that now, which is these are our styles, and we can switch over to Canadian spelling. And I can rerun that check with Canadian preferences rather than Chicago preferences. And in that way, I can go all the way through with the Canadian preferences. All the way through with Chicago. I can repeat with the Canadian ones. And you can see here now we are finding our OURs instead of ORs. And then I can switch back to Chicago towards the end of that. So that's how I think we're going to start suggesting that. It's not what it says on our website at this point, but I think that's how we're going to start suggesting people do it. You switch over, you check with Chicago, and then you can use a regional or geographic preference as well. I'm going to switch back to presentation. Anything, any questions, or Russell, anything else you really wanted me to cover from the issues that you've seen in this document?
No, not really. I might mention that you know, people wonder about like what will it find, what it won't find. I think the italics one is a good example of that, because the net that we cast for italics for words and phrases that are, you know, directly from another language that are familiar enough in English that you don't have to italicize, there will probably be some false positives for that. But the idea is any one of those terms is unlikely to turn up in a document. So we check for hundreds that are in Merriam-Webster, but may not be familiar. So basically, it teaches you the idea that, well, you don't have to italicize them just because they're not you know, English language terms. And that's an important concept. You know, for instance, a lot of food terms that are from other languages, you wouldn't get italics just because they're from another language. So that's the teachable moment that you talk about. You learn what's at stake there. Why would you put a term from another language in italics? And you know, the answer is to signal that it's from another language, but you don't always have to do that. So it brings the manual right into Word.
Thank you. Okay, so hopefully that gives you an idea of what you can do with the Chicago Manual Style for PerfectIt. Next bit is for that applies whether you're running the PC version or the Mac version. Both have the product in. This next bit is just for the Windows users. So what you can do is, in addition to having the Chicago Manual Style for PerfectIt built in, you can also build your style on top of that. So if your house style has a reference style that is Chicago, you can have your preferences plus Chicago preferences underneath, which is one of the coolest things about this tool, I think. And I'm going to show that in just a sec, but I want to sort of explain the concept, which is the idea that I mean, it really depends on your sector, but you could have your reference style, you could have your house style, and then on top of that, you could have individual projects, individual publications that you work with. They may all have their own styles, and each of these layers of styles can all be combined in PerfectIt. So the obvious ones that we're going to do today is just the reference style, Chicago, with your house style. But I want to make clear that like you could build many more than that, and you can have lots and lots of house styles, lots of preferences built into PerfectIt. So let me just jump back over and show you that in action. So to do that, we would use the Manage Styles button. And what I would do is I would create a new style. And let's make that the Editors Canada house style. And that's just creating a new blank style. If I were to click edit on that, you would see basically nothing is listed there today. But I'll do that. Actually, I'll click edit, and I don't know what editors can. Oh, I know exactly what we would do. We would have a rule built in, something like it should warn if it finds the phrase EAC. Those of you who have been members for a long time will remember that one. If it finds the phrase, it should suggest Editors Canada, and add that. So just in case we're going through some old document, still refers to the old name. And we could even have a little note to the user in this case, unless used in historical context, use the current name of the association. So that will look for instances of EAC in a document. suggest Editors Canada, and give that little note to the users as well. I'm going to jump out of that. That's the one thing we're going to build into our Editors Canada house style for today. What I really want to demonstrate is this notion of combine. So I'm going to click combine, and my root style, the base style from that diagram before, is the Chicago Manual of Style. On top of that, I'm going to build the preferences in from our new Editors Canada house style, which I am hoping will become the official style of Editors Canada. And I'm going to name that, I don't know, CMOS with Editors Canada house style. And I'm going to click OK. And what that will do is that will take the 13,000 plus preferences that are built into CMOS, add the one preference that we've built in today, and create a joint style which we could then select, and we'll do the 13,001 or whatever is the total together. That would be at the start. It would be in that list. So now CMOS with Editors Canada house style is a style in the list that we can use. Before I jump back to the final few slides, are there any questions while I'm still in the interface here?
Well, there are a few questions that I could answer quickly right now, if that's okay.
Go for it.
Well, there was one about AD, BC versus CE and BCE, and that's a good opportunity to say that Chicago style for PerfectIt, it checks for periods in those. So if you use periods in any of those, it will suggest the version without periods. But it'll also look for instance, 100 AD and suggest AD 100 because it's Latin, and technically the correct way is to do AD 100 because it's the year should follow the AD. The others, for BC, it'll check for the opposite and ask you to switch it. I don't think it checks for that with BCE and CE. Those would be uncommon errors, but that was a question. So there are two levels that it checks there. And there was also a question about, like, let's say you edit documents that have the word center in the names of organizations, like CENTRE, and what would PerfectIt do about that? If it flags it for the ER version or the RE version, depending on which dictionary you're using, that kind of thing, basically consistency. So if you have it right, but it's RE in the name of an organization and ER in your document, PerfectIt will find it, but those will be false positives. But the thing that will come up in Chicago is it'll recommend the ER version because that's Merriam-Webster, but it'll say unless it's in the name of an organization. It includes that reminder. So each time those little style notes come up, and they come up for everything, sometimes a general style note of its consistency, but when it tells you something like unless or except or if, those are your signals to say, oh, wait a minute, like the one that Daniel showed before with the 70-something% at the beginning of a sentence remained spelled out. So PerfectIt, all these notes that we've written, many of them are customized to recognize the exceptions where possible, because we can't find, it would take a really, it would be possible, it'd be pretty advanced artificial intelligence to know that it's the name of an organization, or we could dump names of hundreds of organizations into the program. That would be possible too, but there are limits to doing things like that. And that question about track changes, I just wanted to mention that yes, it does work with track changes. I know that as a copy editor, that's, track changes in Word, that's the bread and butter, that's everything. But as an article at PerfectIt will say, you should run it in showing, I think, simple markup rather than all markup, just so it works better that way. And let's see, one question that came up was, will it check for one space versus two? And that's a great question, because that, again, PerfectIt supplements Word. Word will check that for you. You can turn that on, and I like that turned on. I always do find and replace or a cleanup macro, but I love seeing the double blue line telling me that I have too many spaces. But at the end, if you want, PerfectIt, we didn't get to the end at the demonstration, but there's a list of things that'll say, do you want to clean up out spaces from the document, for example? That's one of the items. And if you say yes, then you go ahead and do it, it will do it. That is relatively dangerous unless you know that you probably got them all, but may have accidentally put one in at the last minute. You know, you shouldn't have instances of 2 spaces in a document, but you know, there may be, and you could screw something up. So, you know, if you work with all of Word's functionality, take advantage of all of that, and your editorial intelligence and reading it through several times, and PerfectIt, then really it's got you covered at that point. And there was also a question about APA style, and APA is a very good style, so consider that a request, Daniel.
Fair enough. As I've said before, I sit by the phone, you know, essentially waiting for all the other style manuals to call. Yeah, so on the subject of which, just talk through some of the mechanics of this. One of the cool things about this is not just what it does, it's what we focused on today, but I think people really like the way we've introduced it. So if you have a membership, an individual membership of the Chicago Manual of Style, and you have an individual subscription to PerfectIt, you get the two products without paying any extra. I know that in Editors Canada, there's a bit of a sensitivity around that because people don't tend to have individual memberships because it's got through the society. I'm afraid that there was no way we could make that work. So you do need to get an individual subscription to the Chicago Manual if you want to use it. But Editors Canada gives you a discount on that, and it's remarkably inexpensive. So I hope people do still like the way we've introduced that. We've really done our best to make that an affordable option for editors. In terms of how you do it, for Mac users, PC users had their time in the sun a few slides ago when we said, you know, oh, this is the advanced functionality, only works on Windows. This is the return from that moment when the Mac users get to laugh at the Windows users. If you are a Mac user, the way you link the products is you go into the PerfectIt website and you click join, and it will sort of read across, it checks your subscription to PerfectIt and to Chicago Manual, and it will give you the new product, and it will just be there. It will just be there in PerfectIt Cloud next time you run it. Really, really straightforward for Mac users. If you are a PC user, you know the deal. You get all that nice functionality, but you've got to work a little harder for it. So what you need to do first of all is you need to make sure you're on the latest version. You need to be on PerfectIt 5 to make use of the Chicago Manual of Style. So you need to install that. And then when you've done that, you need to do the same linking procedure I just described. And then when you've done that, you'll have a new license key. And that new license key needs to go into PerfectIt. The reason why it's a bit more complicated is because PerfectIt 5 is 100% local. It doesn't check the internet, it doesn't check networks, it doesn't connect to anything anywhere. As a result, it is a bit more complicated to put your license detail in. But that's, you know, really, really high level of security that it achieves, and so it's a little fraction harder. You must be using the same, just, you know, Chris will be sitting here. If I didn't go through some of the details of where these go wrong, it's really important to use the same email address for your CMOS Online account and your PerfectIt account. And you must have at least 2 months remaining on your CMOS Online account. Yeah, then just log into the PerfectIt site and you will see that connect to your account button, and that's really it. I'm not going to go through and try and demonstrate that across browsers and things, but hopefully you can see the idea here that, you know, I ran it on a version that was already unlocked. This is the procedure to do that. You will choose Chicago Manual from that list of styles. You'll click activate and then enter your new key. Pricing, just very quickly, I said it was remarkably affordable. It certainly is. And even more so thanks to Editors Canada. So we try to keep these things very, very affordable for editors, but Editors Canada, even better, 30% discount on PerfectIt. I think it's a 20% discount on Chicago Manual. All the ways to get to those benefits is in your the member benefits section of the Editors Canada website. Really recommend that. And if you have more questions, I think we have time for just a couple. If we can't cover it today, you can tweet at us, and we're not the best on social media, but you know, we do check. We'll get back to you at some point. And if you send us an email, we will definitely get back to you, because we understand that technology and we're okay with that one. Yes, any other questions?
There's one question about what checks does PerfectIt with CMOS do for abbreviations with currency, and that at that point there's I think one thing that Chicago adds, PerfectIt already has a setting that you can adjust relative to space next to you know, between the currency symbol and a number. That is turned on. So if there's, you know, a space between a currency and a symbol and a number in Chicago style for PerfectIt, it'll flag that. But also, I think Chicago style, if you write, like, let's say $50 million, let's say deal, it's not hyphenated, even though it's a $50 million deal. It's normally hyphenated, but Chicago doesn't. It says don't use hyphens with expressions that include symbols, including currency symbols. So there's a check for that. And that includes like at least a dozen different symbols, including, I think, Bitcoin. But that's the range of that. There are probably other things you could do if especially if you had the Word version and wanted to get creative and change your preferences.
Awesome. I think we might have time for one more, or we can call it that.
There's also one about does it do any checking of equations? And the answer to that is not as far as I know. And I would guess that PerfectIt doesn't go into an equation object and analyze it. So unfortunately, no.
That was a very quick one. Is there anything else? Any other ones?
I don't see any. A lot of them were about, you know, Canadian spelling versus US spelling, and so I hope that idea of combining styles and running the spelling check as a separate check, I hope those were helpful. Awesome.
Well, thank you everyone for coming today. It's fantastic. I know it's virtual, and you've seen, you know, I'm in the UK, and you've seen it get dark outside as I've been talking, but it's still wonderful to do things with Editors Canada. Delighted to be here, and really appreciate everyone coming along. And yeah, thank you everyone.
Yes, thank you everyone, definitely.
Thank you so much, Daniel, Jennifer, Russell, and Chris, for your wonderful and informative presentation. And thank you everyone for attending. I am going to stop the recording. However, prior to doing that, I want to really quickly go over the Q&A for those questions that were answered silently, for the people who are going to come later with the recording. So if you'll just give me 1 or 2 minutes, we'll just quickly run through those questions. We'll just give me a second to go through the ones that were not answered. So what edition of the Chicago Manual of Style is used? It is the 17th edition of the manual. It looks like we have, would it catch double spaces? That was answered. Can PC users share their combined style guides with Mac users? At this time, no. PerfectIt Cloud, the Mac OS solution, does not yet support customization. I believe that's everything that was answered silently that wasn't dealt with during the presentation. So thank you very much, everyone, for being here and for just offering all this wonderful information. Thank you. And I'm going to stop the recording.